Hello everyone. Today we are going to begin with the third poem in your course called Macavity the Mystery Cat, written by T.S. Eliot. So let's begin. T.S. Eliot was born on 26th September 1888 and he died on 4th January 1965. His full name was Thomas Stearns Eliot. T.S. Eliot was an American-British poet, essayist, publisher, playwright, literary critic and an editor. He was a very talented person. Eliot was born in St. Louis, Missouri, in United States of America, and he moved to England, to Britain in 1914 at the age of 25. He went on to settle, work, and marry there. There means in England, in Britain. So that's why he is called an American-British poet. Eliot is considered to be one of the 20th century's major poets. He was also known for his 7 plays. Eliot was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1948 for his outstanding pioneer contribution to present-day poetry. So he was a very famous poet. He was awarded the Nobel Prize of Literature in 1948. So that was the introduction to the poet. Let's move on and read the poem now. Macavity is a mystery cat. He is called the Hidden Paw, for he is the master criminal who can defy the law. He is the bafflement of Scotland Yard, the flying squad's despair, for when they reach the scene of crime, Macavity is not there. Macavity, there's no one like Macavity. He has broken every human law, he breaks the law of gravity. His powers of levitation would make a fakir stare, and when you reach the scene of crime, Macavity is not there. You may seek him in the basement, you may look up in the air, but I tell you once again, Macavity is not there. Macavity is a ginger cat. He is very tall and thin. You would know him if you saw him, for his eyes are sunken in. His brow is deeply lined with thought, his head is highly domed, his coat is dusty from neglect, his whiskers are uncombed. He sways his head from side to side with movements like a snake, and when you think he is half asleep, he is always wide awake. Macavity, there's no one like Macavity, for he is a fiend in feline shape, a monster of depravity. You may meet him in a by-street, you may see him in the square, but when a crime is discovered, then Macavity is not there. So this was the poem. Let's analyze it stanza-wise. Macavity is a mystery cat. He is called the Hidden Paw. So the poet says that Macavity is a mystery cat. He is also known as the Hidden Paw, meaning that he is always hidden and he never leaves any footprints behind him. Mystery means something that's hidden, something that's unknown. So the whereabouts of Macavity remain unknown to everybody. Nobody knows where he is. For he is the master criminal who can defy the law. So Macavity, according to the poet, is a master criminal. He is an expert criminal who can defy. Defy means disobey the law. He is the bafflement of Scotland Yard, the flying squad's despair. So Macavity is the reason why the Scotland Yard, the headquarters of the London police force, are always baffled. Baffled means confused. They don't know what to do, where to find him. And the flying squad's despair. The flying squad is a group of policemen ready to move into action. So it is a small team which is ready to move into action if anything wrong happens. So Macavity is the reason for the flying squad's despair. Despair means sadness. And why are they sad? Because they can't find Macavity anywhere. For when they reach the scene of crime, Macavity is not there. So whenever the police reaches the crime scene, Macavity is never there. So this stanza describes how Macavity is a mysterious cat, because this cat can never be found at the crime scene. He always breaks the laws and he irritates the police who can never catch him. So let's move ahead to the next stanza now. Macavity, there's no one like Macavity. He's broken every human law. He breaks the law of gravity. So the poet says that there is no one like Macavity because he has broken every law that human beings have made. So these are the laws that are written in our constitution. Macavity has broken every such law. But along with these laws, he has also broken the law of gravity. Now what's the law of gravity? The law of gravity is that the earth exerts a force upon you which pulls you towards the earth. But Macavity breaks even this law. And what does it mean? His powers of levitation would make a fakir stare. It means that Macavity has got the powers of levitation. Levitation means the power to float in the air, right? So this means that gravity does not affect Macavity at all. It is this power that could make a fakir, a sadhu, stare at him in surprise, right? So Macavity breaks the laws of the nature along with the laws of the human beings. And when you reach the scene of crime, Macavity is not there. You may seek him in the basement, you may look up in the air, but I tell you once and once again, Macavity is not there. So the poet again repeats himself and tells us that it is impossible to find Macavity on the scene of crime because he always runs away. You would not find him in the basement or up in the air because he is just not there. In this stanza, the poet says that Macavity has supernatural powers like that of the power of levitation with which he can float in the air. So this makes Macavity even more mysterious, even more hidden. So there is this sense of confusion, this sense of mystery around Macavity. We don't know what all he can do, right? So let's move on to the third stanza now. Macavity is a ginger cat. He is very tall and thin. So, ginger is a person with red hair, freckles, and pale skin. So, the poet says that Macavity is a ginger cat. He's very tall and very thin. You would know him if you saw him, for his eyes are sunken in. The poet says that if you look closely, his eyes are sunken in, meaning they're deep set in his face. They're lower than the surrounding area. His brow is deeply lined with thought, his head is highly domed. The poet says that Macavity's brows are always tensed, as if he's always thinking about something. Because he's a criminal, he's always thinking about his next move. They're scrunched up, lined with deep thinking. His head is hemispherical, domed in shape. His coat is dusty from neglect, his whiskers are uncombed. The poet says that Macavity has failed to care for his appearance. He has neglected his coat, which has become dusty now, and his whiskers means a cat's facial hair. They are also not combed properly. So basically the poet wants to say that Macavity looks shabby, very untidy, very unkempt. He doesn't care about his appearance at all. He sways his head from side to side with movements like a snake, and when you think he's half asleep, he's always wide awake. So the poet says that he sways. Sways means moves from one side to other. So he swings his head from side to side like that of a snake. He's very flexible. He also says that Macavity fools people by pretending to be asleep. So when people think that he's sleeping, he's actually wide awake. He isn't sleeping at all. So in this stanza, the poet has described Macavity's appearance. He's described Macavity as a tall, thin cat with deep-set eyes and a hemispherical head. But he doesn't care about his appearance, as his coat is always dusty and his whiskers are uncombed, unkempt. We are also told that Macavity fools people by pretending to be asleep when he's actually wide awake. So let's move on to the fourth stanza. Macavity, there is no one like Macavity, for he is a fiend in feline shape, a monster of depravity. So the poet repeats himself that there is no one like Macavity because he is a fiend. Fiend means a demon, an evil, a bad person in feline shape. Feline means resembling a cat, cat-like shape. So the poet calls him a cat-shaped devil or a cat-like monster. He says that Macavity is the monster of depravity. Depravity means moral corruption. So the poet here is saying that Macavity is morally corrupt, an unethical cat who engages in wrong deeds or crimes. So he is morally corrupt person. You may meet him in a by street, you may see him in the square, but when a crime is discovered, then Macavity is not there. The poet says that it is so difficult to find and identify Macavity because you may find him or see him on the road or even in the town square, but you will never be able to find him at a crime scene. So in this stanza, the poet compares Macavity with a demon, a monster who engages in morally corrupt behavior, one who is a criminal, right? So that was the stanza-wise explanation of the poem. Let's now discuss the literary aspects of the poem. So first we'll discuss the rhyme scheme. The rhyme scheme is the sequence of rhyming words at the end of each line of the poem, right? Let's look at these words. The first word is paw, which rhymes with law. So we'll quote them as AA. Despair, dare. These two words also rhyme with each other, so we'll code them as B. Macavity, gravity, they rhyme, so we'll code them as A. Stare, there, air, there, all of these are rhyming words, so we'll code them as B. Thin, in, we'll code them as A. Domed, uncombed, B, because they rhyme. Snake, awake, again they rhyme, so we'll code them as C. Macavity, depravity, we'll code them as AA because they are rhyming. Square rhymes with there, so we'll code them as BB. So this was the rhyming scheme of the poem. Now let's discuss the poetic devices. The poetic devices are the techniques or devices that are used by the poet to make the poem even more effective, even more interesting for the audience. Let's discuss the first poetic device, which is alliteration. Alliteration is a device where two or more words in the same line of poetry have the same beginning consonant sound. I'll explain it with an example. Tall and thin, the t sound is repeated, so therefore this is an example. Another example is his head highly. There's a repetition of the her sound, so therefore this is an example of alliteration. Let's look at another example. Fiend, feline, so the first sound is repeated. So all of these are the examples of alliteration. Let's come to the next poetic device, which is simile. A simile is a poetic device which makes direct comparison between two similar things by using words such as like, such as. This comparison is not implicit, it's not hidden, it's explicit, it's out there. Let's discuss this example. Sways his head like a snake. So this is an example of simile because the poet is directly comparing the act of swaying with the movement of a snake, right? Let's discuss the next poetic device, which is repetition. Repetition is the repetition of words or phrases to emphasize upon any idea. Macavity is not there. It's repeated thrice in the poem. So the poet wants to emphasize the idea that whenever anybody wants to search for Macavity, Macavity is never present on the crime scene. Macavity, there's no one like Macavity. So this line is also repeated twice in the poem, and this is repeated to show that Macavity is very different from all of the other cats because he's mysterious and the things that he can do, nobody else can do, right? So these are the examples of repetition. Now let's discuss the final poetic device which is used in the poem, which is called metaphor. Unlike a simile, it is an implicit, a hidden or implied comparison between two unrelated things. But these things must share one common quality. Now the example is monster of depravity. Depravity means moral corruption, like I told you. So he is a monster of depravity. So this is an example of metaphor because there's an implicit comparison between a monster and the quality of depravity, right? Let's move ahead and let's discuss the major themes in the poem. The first theme is moral corruption. So this poem is like a commentary on people who are morally corrupt and are criminals. They are like a spot on the civil society. These people are undesirable. Nobody likes these people. The police is after them and they do crimes against humanity. They break all sorts of laws. So the poet wants to comment upon these people through this funny poem, right? The second theme is mischief. The poet has used the character of a cat to convey the theme of mischief in a humorous way. Obviously the poet is creating humor, but he wants to send a message to say that these people are not good people. One should not engage in such a behavior, in moral corruption, because these people are treated like monsters. Then they are considered monsters, they are considered devils, like evil people. So that's all for this poem. Thank you so much for watching.